Hello and welcome to Business Standard. What was India and the world talking about this week? Here is a glimpse of the views of the week from the pages of Business Standard. In his weekly column National Interest, Shekhar Gupta writes about PM Narendra Modi's folly of assuming there won't be a war with China. He writes that it was this belief which led to the Modi government not spending enough money on Indian defense. With a declining defense budget, India's armed forces modernization has taken a hit and now India finds itself in a difficult position in Ladakh. He writes that the assumption that there won't be a conventional war was probably correct, but the belief that China won't be a military threat was not. He calls it Modi's strategic half-blunder. Household financial savings are usually 10% of the GDP in India. In the April to June quarter, this figure was more than double. Similarly, corporate profits also reported a jump in the July to September quarter. In his weekly column, T. N. Nayanan tries to explain these anomalies in a time of economic downturn due to COVID-19. He blames it on uncertainty about the future. Consumers went into hibernation as the downturn spread and saved more. Similarly, companies let go of employees and cut back on expenditure, often more than the reduction in earnings, thereby increasing their profits. But the rate of inflation hasn't fallen, he notes, and asks how long the RBI can continue to ignore this rise in inflation. The National Democratic Alliance managed to win the tight Bihar elections, and it was on the back of a good showing by the BJP. Prime Minister Narendra Modi takes credit for this win. Veer Sanghvi writes about the phenomena that Narendra Modi has become. He is the most popular leader that India has seen since Indira Gandhi, writes Sanghvi. And while Mrs. Gandhi's popularity was based on solid achievements, the breakup of Pakistan, for instance, and faded when those achievements dried up, Mr. Modi has no reason to bother to deliver substantial achievements. His image and his popularity seem enough to carry him through, notes Sanghvi. India has put Quad at the center of its Indo-Pacific strategy, and for this, it ought to thank China, writes former Foreign Secretary Shyam Saran. The Quad is no longer a hedging exercise, but its path towards plurilateral partnership and potential alliance remains uncertain. It is China's behavior in the post-pandemic geopolitical landscape which may determine the Quad's future trajectory, writes the former diplomat. In his weekly column, Mahesh Vyas takes a look at the employment situation in the country. This week, he turned his attention to employment in listed companies. Listed companies increased their headcount by 2.8% in the year 2019-20. Listed companies did much better on providing additional jobs than the rest of the economy, he notes. These companies provide better quality jobs, and so it is particularly reassuring to see these jobs grow faster than the overall growth of jobs in India, he notes. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced a fresh stimulus package for the economy on Thursday. A Business Standard editorial welcomes the move and calls it a step in the right direction. The stimulus package and Wednesday's production-linked incentive scheme for 10 important sectors, which would help boost manufacturing output, were required. The government has done well to find space to support economic activity under the given fiscal constraints, notes the editorial. The week gone by also saw the 4th anniversary of the Modi government's decision to demonetize old currency notes of Rs 500 and Rs 1000 on 8th November 2016. It is fair to say that demonetization remains a controversial policy intervention and its benefits, if any, are even with hindsight hard to discern, says another Business Standard editorial this week. While the government's claims of the move's success are hard to support with evidence, the arguments on its negative sides are clear. Demonetization hurt informal enterprises and employment generation in the country, says the editorial, and concludes that even with hindsight, it is hard to claim that the possible positives of demonetization outweigh the obvious negatives. The world cheered a positive announcement by pharma giant Pfizer this week. This was the news about Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine candidate showing over 90% efficacy with no major side effects in phase 3 trials. This announcement may not be a positive for India, according to a Business Standard editorial. This vaccine candidate needs to be stored at minus 70 degrees Celsius or lower, and then it needs to be thawed and kept at a temperature just above 0 degrees Celsius for at most 24 hours. This presents a big challenge for the Indian supply chain, and the government now needs to decide whether it wants to pursue this vaccine candidate and then invest in creating a supply chain for the same. Joe Biden, the Democratic Party candidate, emerged victorious in the US elections at the end of last week after days of counting. Biden, now president-elect, will take over as president in the second half of January from the incumbent President Donald Trump. This change of guard in the US will present a new challenge for Indian foreign policy, notes a Business Standard editorial. It is a mixed blessing for India, it argues. The Modi government's diplomacy allowed India to be identified too closely with the Trump administration and also unnecessarily alienated some progressive Democrats. These Democrats may now gain power in a new Washington establishment. This would need some effort from the Indian government so that this change in leadership can be made to work for India. So that is it from us this week. See you next week for more views from Business Standard.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.